26th. I'd like to call this meeting to order and ask for a roll call, wherever Robin is. Oh, down there.
Trustee Gomez?
Here.
Trustee Castellanos?
Here.
Trustee Moreno?
Present.
Trustee Rivera?
Present.
Trustee Brown?
Here.
Trustee Mathis?
Here.
Trustee Stebbins?
Here.
Trustee Vasquez?
Present. Thank you, Robin. Before we begin, we're here today to hear a report and have some discussion on the calculation error that resulted in over-reporting of student attendance. The next item is public comments. And I know blue cards have been going out, but this is kind of a big session. So, we're going to suspend a little bit of that formality. And I'll make public comment available both before and after the presentation. So I have one blue card for after the presentation, but if there's anyone now that would like to, before we begin the briefing, address the board, you're willing to, you're happy to, I'm happy that you take the podium out here in front. There being no one, I'm going to turn the briefing over to our president, Kathy Hart. Oh, that's all right.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for coming this afternoon so that we can brief you on the over-reporting of FTES. We think it's very important that everyone have the accurate and correct information, and so we're going to count on you to spread that word. But before we begin, I want to kind of walk through what we're going to do today. The purpose of the meeting is to inform the community about the over-reporting of our attendance. We're going to describe the problem. We're going to explain that we have notified the Chancellor's office, and we obviously have notified the board. That's why they're here. We're going to give you the background on the error that occurred. We're going to talk about the next steps, how we're going to correct this, and what we will be doing in the future. And we're going to be emphasizing the importance of teamwork to help make the necessary changes here at the college. This is going to take all of our efforts to rectify this. So we've just finished briefing the campus community leaders and asked for their help and support. Now we're addressing all of you in a special board meeting to inform you and the public about what we know about this issue. Just about 3 years ago, we came together in the face of a crisis. In my view, we have done very well since. We've gotten through the budget crisis and review of our core services. We've regained our full accreditation, and we've made progress in every area of the campus and the community. We're stronger than ever, but now we have a real challenge ahead of us. And this challenge is going to require teamwork. But first, we want to make sure that everyone gets the same information and that that information is accurate and factual. We want everyone to keep the information in perspective. We won't know the resolution for some time, since we need to work toward a solution. In the meantime, we need to continue teaching, counseling, and learning, providing quality services to our students, and going about our business. We need to remain calm and rational. There is no need to speculate or to panic. As you can see, the board is aware of the situation and they support us, all of us. You can be sure that they have the best interests of students, staff, and the public uppermost in their minds. Finally, there is no one to blame in this situation. We believe the over-reporting was completely unintentional. And now I'd like to turn the podium over to Matt Wetstein, who is going to walk through what we've learned, the whole process. I'll come back and do a closing, and then you'll have an opportunity to ask questions. Thanks.
Good afternoon, everyone. The steps that I'm going to go through are to sort of start at a high-level description of the problem that we uncovered and talk somewhat about the impacts of it in terms of magnitude, and then to dive in a little deeper into how the calculation error occurred, how we uncovered it and found it out, and to again come back to the fiscal implications of it potentially, at least as we estimate it at this time. And then we'll talk a little bit about next steps towards the end of my presentation and hand it back to Dr. Hart for some of the concluding thoughts. Just as a way of starting with this, in early January, and actually mid-January, the college was in the process of having to file its apportionment report, its attendance report for the first period for this year. In the course of a year, the college has to file 3 reports, one that comes in January, one in April, and one in July. The January one, its purpose is to give the Chancellor's Office and the entire system a kind of baseline reading on what summer enrollments and fall enrollments have looked like at our college and all the colleges in the system. And in the course of starting to file that report and gather the data, what was uncovered was that there were certain courses, certain class sections that were having higher counts of students and FTEs, not students, but FTEs, full-time equivalent students that were showing up on those particular sections. And I'll get into that a little more as I go through the deeper dive into the issues. When we noticed that, we made a call directly to the Chancellor's Office to say, we think we have a programming error in our data. We may need an extension of a day to file our report for January. And there were several of us at that point who spent a day looking at the various sections that were impacted by this programming change to make sure that that calculation, which was showing up wrong, got corrected, and so that our report that we submitted in January was actually an accurate reflection of our FTEs for this particular year. And so we turned that report in. But at that point, we recognized we've got a programming error. We need to see how far back this programming and calculation problem exists. And so that started a series of looks and research into attendance files that the college had turned in going back as far as fall of 2000. We wanted to go back far enough to get a read on how had the college been turning in reports going back starting in 2000, moving forward in time to the current semester, to try to get an understanding of what were we reporting as far back as 2000 and try to find when the calculation change and programming error change got introduced. In doing that research, what we uncovered was that the calculation change for full-time equivalent students got introduced into programming starting in the 2011-12 academic year. And so our attendance reports for that year, 2012-13 and 2013-14, were the 3 years that we were noticing this calculation incorrectly on certain kinds of classes. We caught it for this year, and so our first report on attendance for this year was, we believe, an accurate reflection of our attendance for summer and fall. And then we'll do another report in April to the Chancellor's Office, and then of course another one in July for this current academic year. So in thinking about the impact of this, what we want to make clear today is there are ways that we can estimate the fiscal impact of it based on the information we have, and it's our best understanding of the data. And so it's clear that it's a potential negative impact, as Dr. Hart said in her campus-wide email. What we don't know at this point is the true magnitude of that impact, because the Chancellor's Office will have to spend some time working with our college to go through the calculation of the error, the fixes that we're suggesting are being made, and walking them through the methodology of our programming on attendance accounting and on full-time equivalent students. So until we get an understanding from the Chancellor's office, we won't know the full magnitude of the fiscal impact. We do have an estimate, though, that we can present from our perspective. The other thing I would like to reiterate, as Dr. Hart said, is this: it really is an institutional issue. And so the issue of full-time equivalent students and being overstating those FTEs reflects on many departments and the work of many departments throughout the college. And so, you know, you have to think about faculty who submit rosters of attendance. That's where it all starts. And so the accurate reporting of attendance in your classes for faculty is an important element. Marketing and outreach to make sure that we're getting as many students to come to the college is an important thing. So it touches on student services. And certainly in instruction, one of the things you'll find in this presentation is there's work that the instruction units will have to do and the deans in revamping the schedule of classes. There's IT and information services programming associated with this, and a close connection that has to occur between our office and information services. So in many ways, the reporting of FTEs, the generating of them, the attendance tracking of them is an institutional issue. And so many people will be asked to contribute work to this solution. And so I want to stress that, as well as Dr. Hart. The other thing I'd like to do before going into the detail of how we found this is to publicly thank the pre-office, the Planning Research Institutional Effectiveness staff, and particularly Sabrina Sensel, and also the IT staff, Chris McDonald in Information Services, for the tremendous amount of work that they have had to do over the last 4 weeks to help uncover the error, work on programming and calculation errors associated with this. And so they have done a ton of work that has helped the college in this case. So let me go into the background of how the error was generated and how we ended up finding it. In order to do this, I just want to spend a little bit of time describing how the college is funded through FTE's revenue, so that everyone has a baseline understanding of that, and then how the calculation error had an impact on us. So the college receives revenue based on full-time equivalent students, FTEs, and so for every student who takes 15 units a semester or 30 units for a year, fall and spring, that represents one full-time equivalent student. And the state funds through a formula that is roughly about $4,565 per full-time equivalent student. The way that you get to the full-time equivalent students is to think of students sitting in a class as one contact hour, as one of those 15 hours, for example. And so the calculation of FTEs is based on student contact hours with direct instruction with faculty in the classroom or in lab settings. What happened in this case in finding this calculation error was that the calculation of contact hours for students in what are called partial hour classes was the error that was introduced into our programming in 2012, in May or June of 2012. And so to understand this, you need to think of the standard hour-and-a-half course that meets on a Tuesday, Thursday schedule, for example. If you're familiar with the college, it would be, for a 3-unit course, it might be an hour-and-a-half Tuesday, hour-and-a-half Thursday, 8 to 9:30 would be the way it's reflected in our class schedule. Those are partial hour classes. They have a full hour and then a half hour associated with them that generates a certain amount of contact hours. And in the past calculations, our old method of programming, in going back to 2000, what we were able to uncover was that was accurately generating the contact hour and FTEs calculation all the way up till 2012. And at that point, there was a programming change that was introduced that started to estimate and add into that hour-and-a-half kind of course what's called the passing time of the course. And so you need to think of a course that's actually scheduled from 8 to 9:30 should allow 10 minutes of passing time to get to the next class that would start at 9:30 and run from 9:30 to 11 as listed in our schedule. And so the calculation error that was introduced was to count those 10 minutes at the end of an hour as if the students were receiving instruction when it should have been passing time and not added into the calculation for the FTEs. And so that passing time conversion was the programming change that appeared in May or June of 2012, and it had the effect of overstating our FTEs and enrollment contact hours, essentially, in those hour-and-a-half courses, which are the bread and butter, sort of large volume, some 2.5-hour courses or 3.5-hour courses. So anything that would go into a half-hour mode would have been overstating FTEs. Recognizing that at that point, we sort of identified the point in time when that programming change was introduced. It was then that the pre-office and IT started working on going back and restoring the old programming code, while at the same time reflecting on other programming changes that have been introduced since that time. As an example, we started in, I believe in 13-14 to correctly tabulate AB 540 students. These are students who are immigrant students or children of immigrants who are eligible to be counted as residents of California in the calculation of FTEs. And the college started establishing the FTEs calculation for those students in 13-14. We programmed that back to 11-12, 12-13. And so there were a series of programming changes and files that needed to be generated based on those programming changes to not only correct for the passing time problem, but also try to correct for FTEs we should have been capturing and reporting to the Chancellor's office, or certainly had the ability to report. So through that work, we feel we're at a point where we're able to estimate as best as we can at this point what we would report as FTEs for those various terms today, recognizing that programming change on the passing time and a few others. I do want to reiterate, as Dr. Hart said, that there's really no evidence here of intent to do this in any malicious way. It was just an honest mistake that got entered into our calculation and our coding that had this impact of overstating the FTEs and contact hours. So on this particular table that's on the screen, what we're trying to reflect here is our best estimate at this point of the magnitude of overstating the FTEs and the fiscal impact that might be associated with it. So in the very first column, what you'll see is a column labeled the total funded FTES target. So the Chancellor's office sets for each college an annual target of funded FTEs that they say, we will pay you for this level of students or number of students, full-time equivalent. So in the 11-12 year, that first circled number suggests that our target, funded target for that year was 15,003 full-time equivalent students. The second column is the actual data that we reported to the Chancellor's office back in 2011-12 that said we reported we taught 16,326. So you can see there we're well above the target for that year, and you end up in the third column then seeing what's called unfunded students or FTEs. So often if you're around the college a lot, you'll hear a funded cap and then being over cap or under cap. In that particular year, we taught 1,323 students over our cap, which gets labeled as unfunded FTEs for the year. You may also remember, if you've been around Delta, that was a year where we had a mid-year budget cut that actually lowered our cap. And so we ended up putting a bunch of sections into the schedule, and then midway through the year, the Chancellor's office saying, you have to cut back. And so one of the reasons we were so far over and had so much unfunded FTEs is because of that mid-year reduction from the Chancellor's office. The fourth column, or the second to last with the other circle, is reflecting our best estimate today based on these programming changes and reinstating the old method of calculating passing hours or backing that out. We're estimating that we would report today, based on our information, 16,116 FTEs for the 11-12 academic year. And so you'll notice on the far right it says no impact. The reason for that is if you compare the 16,116 against the funded target of 15,003, it's still well above the funded base revenue that the college was intended to get for that year. And so there's no fiscal impact because we're still over the revenue target that was set by the state for our college. It's in 2012-13 and in 13-14 that the impact of this programming change for passing time has an effect on the college and a fiscal effect that we can try to estimate at this point. And so there in 12-13, you can see the target was 15,227. If we were to turn in an attendance report today, we would estimate that we would claim 15,188 as the accurate FTEs figure based on the programming being restored. And so because that's below the funded target base of 15,227, there's a fiscal impact of overstating our FTEs and getting revenue that we should not have received from the state. That revenue figure is roughly about $181,000 overstated revenue in that particular year. And it's in the 13-14 year that the biggest magnitude shows up, where our best estimate of reportable FTEs for 13-14 is around 15,003 FTEs, and that's below the base revenue target of 15,472 for the last fiscal year. So there you can estimate it. Our best guess of an estimated fiscal impact as a one-time overstating of revenue is $2.13 million in that particular year. Now we come to this fiscal year, in the current academic year, we were able to catch this in January, so the reporting of our numbers in January as a first period enrollment report allows us to kind of forecast out to what our April and July reports will be. We think we're on target to report somewhere around 15,920. That's an estimate for this year. And because that's above our funded target that's been set at 15,859, we believe there's no fiscal impact as long as we make that threshold number of 15,920. So the two prior academic years have the fiscal impact that we can estimate at this point. And that's our best guess of the one-time impact of overstating these FTEs is in those two calendar years. Now, having said that, it's still the case that the Chancellor's Office hasn't been able to vet our methodology in reprogramming this and taking a look at our data and our reformulation of what we think the attendance reporting should be. So there's some work that the college will have to do in not only doing an internal analysis. You know, this is a deal where we would like to see the fiscal office make sure they're comfortable with the methodology and the numbers. We're going to have to make sure that the Chancellor's Office is comfortable with our methods, and also that we would want an independent auditor to look over our shoulder and make sure that they are following the methods that we're using to recalculate the FTEs and contact hours. So until that work has been done and the Chancellor's Office has had the ability to weigh in on checking the methodology, we don't know the true fiscal impact of this, and that might take a number of months for that to work out. There could be that it's a one-time fiscal impact in the way that we've laid out in that table. It could be that the Chancellor's Office looks at our methodology and also says there should be an ongoing fiscal impact that they might want to impose or present to us. And so until that work is done, we can't know the true magnitude of it. We can present the estimate that we've given today at what we think today the FTEs are as a one-time overstating of FTEs. So the other thing to reiterate again is that there really is no intention in looking at and in researching this on the part of anyone to over-report. It looks like an honest mistake was entered into a calculation method and a programming process, and there's no real intent to overstate that was here. And it was very hard to actually uncover and find in doing this research. So in terms of the next steps, I'll walk through this set and then hand it back to Dr. Hart. We want to still finish the work of reprogramming several different versions of the attendance report, and a lot of this work has already been done by IT staff and Sabrina in the research office. And then in looking at those attendance reports, try to isolate the effect of each of the programming changes that was introduced by the college starting back in 2012 and moving forward, and being able to present in a table format, this programming change resulted in this impact on FTEs or contact hours, and walk through the methodology with the Chancellor's office. So we're still finishing that reprogramming work. It's very close to being done. We'll have to, once we're done with that, meet with the Chancellor's office staff and make sure that we can walk through that methodology with them, and then discuss with them, based on our presentation, what the final resolution should be in terms of fiscal impact of the overstated FTEs. The other part of this is to also do that work with our audit firm so that they're comfortable with the methods that we're employing for our accounting attendance and for our calculation of the FTEs. So they should be able to validate with us the estimated effect as well. On other kinds of issues, the one thing is to make sure that we've got protocols in place that prevent a programming change like this happening without multiple eyes taking a look at it at the same time. And also that a change in programming on this kind of a table, attendance reporting, would really be looked at the highest level of the college before you put it into operation and start to use it. So that will change. We will have protocols in place for that as well. The other component of this is the work that's broader institutional work for different parts of the college to work on. And so I come back to the point that we as a college are going to have to change the way we publish our class schedule to accurately reflect passing time in our class schedule for students and for faculty and for the community. So that you have to think of the work that's going to be involved in changing 8 to 9:30 classes to 8 to 9:20 classes, and then 9:30 to 10:50. And so there's work that's going to be required from the instructional deans, from the staff in instruction. There's also programming work associated with that. There's going to be a need for our recruiting and outreach efforts to ensure that we're attracting students and make sure we get the FTEs, as many as we can, for the summer and into the next year. And so there's a lot of work that's going to impact multiple offices throughout the campus. And so we will need to make sure that we're all working to revamp that class schedule and make sure we're doing it right moving forward. And that's not necessarily easy work to do. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Dr. Hart to let her have some concluding thoughts.
So for the past 3 years, I really believe that we've all grown and made progress in every area of the college. And like 3 years ago, we now have a challenge ahead of us, and it's a challenge that's going to require a lot of work and a lot of teamwork in order for us to appropriately address and remedy this serious institutional issue. We want to make sure, first of all, that everyone gets the same information and that that information is factual. And so we will be posting the PowerPoint. We'll be sending it out to the entire campus community. And we hope that you'll use it as you're talking about this situation because it has the best information that we have at this time. We want everybody to keep this information in perspective. We need to remain calm and rational. We shouldn't speculate, and we certainly shouldn't panic. We need to focus ourselves on what we do best. And that is teaching, counseling, learning, providing quality student services to all of our students, our staff, and to the community. We need to go about our business. What we need now from you is your support. We need your hard work and your cooperation if you should be asked to help. We need your willingness to reassure your colleagues and your students that everything's okay and everything will be okay. Whatever the outcome, Delta will remain a great community college in a great community that needs what we have to offer desperately. Either now or along the way, we hope you'll be able to help us make sure that the information that is shared is always accurate and kept in perspective. We also hope you'll share your ideas for growing our enrollment in 2015-16 and for retaining students and helping them be even more successful. Finally, we will continue to keep the campus community and the citizens of the district informed as we move toward a resolution of this situation. And remember, if we all work together, we can accomplish anything. We'd like to give you the opportunity to ask questions if you have them. I want to remind you that we don't have much more information than what we've already shared, but if you have questions, we'd be happy to try to answer them for you. And there's a mic up here in front that we'd ask you to come forward and use for your questions.
So first, before we go to I have one blue card. Do any members of the board have any comments or questions? There being none, the first blue card is Elizabeth Maloney, SJDC TA.
Thank you. Several comments that I have is, I know this session's being taped, and so I wanted to make sure that, and I know that I had management, but I want it on tape, to say that in the calculation, when we go to change the timelines and the classical schedules under the next step number 5, I want to make sure that then we program back into so that it doesn't have any adverse effect or unintended consequences on any, specifically part-time faculty based on how we pay on an hourly rate. And so I just want to make sure that that's the first comment, that I want to make sure that we address that so there's no unintended consequences for them. And the second comment is that I think this is a really good opportunity for us to try to spin our summer school and to try to grow our summer school. And if we do good marketing for high school students, for people coming home back from college, this is a good way to maybe promote some, if you're a first-time high school student taking a class or you're back taking a class, we can promote that. We could raise our FTSs. We could do some really good recruitment to spin this in a positive way, that now we're going to increase our enrollment in those areas, and that it's a great way to get an excellent education at a really minimal cost, and we could get some good publicity out of this. And so I'm hoping that we can work on some marketing strategies for that.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? That's the only blue card I have, but as I said, we're not, anybody that might have a comment or a thought or a suggestion they want to share, you're welcome to take the podium. And if you don't mind, just give us your name.
Sure. I'm Phil Reedy. I teach chemistry. Just had a question, Matt. It looks like it's about $2.4 million. Do you guys have a plan about how we'll absorb that if that is the amount? I know our reserve is usually pretty healthy. And I was curious if we're going to be able to just absorb it out of our reserves, or there's going to have to be some cuts made to address that?
Yes, we can absorb it in the reserves, but we may want to finance it in some other way if that's what it turns out to be. I don't know. We haven't really talked about. We know that we can absorb it if that's what it ends up to be. So I guess that's the short answer. the long answer is that we're going to want to look at a lot of different possibilities once we really know what the magnitude is.
Thanks.
Thanks for the question.
I think, Kathy, you might want to also add that, there is a multi-year potential impact of this, and the board currently takes a look at budgets over a multi-year, in a multi-year manner, and so that's another component of this, is that the 1 year absorbing it for, as you suggested, might be one thing, but we have to be careful that there isn't any unintended consequence, as it was mentioned before, over the next in the out years.
Exactly.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Eddie Bradford. I am a student here, and also I am a reporter for our KWDC News here on campus, our newly radio station here. I have a question and a comment for you guys. My question is, when it comes to the method you guys use to find the FTEs, it sounds like you're saying that your IT department is in charge of that, and they're working on the formula, or you can say the algorithm used to calculating your FTEs to submit for funding. I'm curious to find out, how is that not checked every year for discrepancies, for maintenance issues, or anything like that? I want to see. I'm trying to find out, how come you guys don't do maintenance work on that?
I think thank you for the question, Eddie. It's in having spent about 3-4 weeks with this myself now, I think one of the protocols that is going to come into play is exactly what you're saying, is that you have a back check that occurs with every attendance report on the various formulas to calculate contact hours for various courses. I can tell you that in doing the research on it, it's a very easy mistake to miss. And the way I described it in the earlier session is that if you were to, for example, introduce the programming change as it was, right, and use this new formula in the computation, and then use various resources that are suggested by the district audit manual that's put out by the Chancellor's office. And so you use the schedule of classes, which they tell you to look at. They tell you to look at the count of students in the class. And so the timeline, the count, the hours it meets per week, you multiply it out using a formula. And if you actually use those materials and look at the attendance reports with the materials that they suggest you look at, it actually calculates out right if you work from the assumption that the class actually meets 8 to 9:30. And so anybody coming to do an audit, or if you were trying to check the formula and it's working, and you were working on the assumption the class meets from 8 to 9:30, every material that you would look at would lead you to believe, oh yeah, the calculation on that course is totally accurate based on the Chancellor's office guidelines for calculating that kind of class. The only way you find the error is by looking back at a prior file. And so when I said earlier that there was a change introduced in May or June of 2012, what you really need to do to find the mistake is to compare a file from June or July of 2012 against a file that was run earlier in April or January when the old methodology was in place, and literally compare section to section from those two different files and see that the calculation was now different, and you see an increased number over here versus the way it was done in the past. That's the tip-off that you can see that they're not equal FTEs, and therefore the change has been introduced. But if you were just looking at this file from June or July, comparing it against methods in the district audit manual, it's a mistake that an auditor or anybody looking at just those files would lead to conclude that it looks right. And so that's the kind of work that has been required in order to identify the error when it happened and do that section-to-section comparison that I just described. But you, as you said, you have identified there are certain protocols that need to be in place for making the checking just a routine that you have to make those checks.
Thank you. And also for the board, I just wanted to make a comment about your future for summer 2015-2016 FTEs. In my opinion, as a student, I realized that summer classes aren't really, I guess the word you can say, there are classes that are available, and then there's the classes that you may need that aren't available. My suggestion is please, hire the professors, the instructors, the teachers needed to teach those classes year-round, so that way those students can get those classes that they needed. Because I can attest that I know a couple, teachers that are here, instructors, that they can say they're part-time, and it's not fair to them because you're overworking them, on part-time hours, let alone when summer school comes, it's not available to them, or summertime comes, that's their best way to make ends meet because you guys are offering that, but that's not equal for everybody. So my suggestion is if you want to get more students here during the summertime, hire the staff, the instructors needed to get those students in to increase your FTEs. Thank you.
Other questions?
Good afternoon. Dana Baker, President of the California School Employees Association, Chapter 359. One of my main concerns is, and I want to ask this question, is this mistake going to cause any type of budget cuts in classified, like layoffs or pay cuts?
As far as we know, it will not. But again, what you're asking us to do is speculate. We think we have our arms around what the damage is going to be. And we think we can absorb that. If that turns out not to be true, and for some reason it turns out to be worse than we believed, and all of this will have to be negotiated with the Chancellor's office. So what we're asking you to do is to just wait and see what happens. We do not believe that it will cause layoffs. We do not believe that it will cause an irreparable harm to the district. But I'm not going to lie and say I know that for sure 100%, because until we haven't even turned in all of our calculations to the Chancellor's office yet. And so all of that has to be done. It'll undoubtedly it's taken us weeks to go through all of this. And I'm sure that it'll take the Chancellor's office at least a couple of weeks, if not longer. We're going to have auditors and so on. And so, we can't promise anything. We don't think so. We don't think it's going to cause layoffs.
Do you know what this is going to do to contract negotiations because we've been without a contract?
No, we don't. We don't. Until we know, we can't say. We just don't know.
Do you know what type of time frame you're looking at?
We don't know that either, because we know how long it's taken us to do the due diligence, which still is not totally complete. We're planning on turning our last set of data into the Chancellor's office on Tuesday. But then they have to look all of this over, and then it will really be in their hands how they choose to resolve this. So we honestly don't know.
Okay.
Good afternoon. My name is Stan Rapata. I'm a financial aid specialist, and I'm currently been in the process of bringing up the Veterans Resource Center for the past, almost 3 years. On a positive spin, and I've been saying this for the past couple of years, we have a demographics in this county of about 58,000 veterans that we need to market Delta to. I hear a lot that we are not known to the community. And from what I understand, from my contemporaries, we have one of the finest Veterans Resource Centers in the system. So I'd like to encourage the school to market to the veterans. They come with benefits. And that was one of the primary reasons that our all-volunteer force joined, was to get educational benefits. And there's no reason why they shouldn't be attending Delta College.
Absolutely. Thank you, Stan.
Good afternoon. My name is Tony Lawson. I work in maintenance operations. And just for clarification on a couple of things here, Trustee Castellano, you said that it may be an impact far-reaching beyond this, what we have right now for the future. Is that correct?
No, what I said is that the board budgets on a multi-year basis, and we want to make sure, as we determine what the nature of this issue is in dealing with the Chancellor's office, that there is no unintended impact or consequence as a result of some of the decisions. It's just, again, it's just exercising caution, not just in solving the problem immediately, but taking care to make sure that we don't inadvertently cause another problem. That's all I was trying to say. I have no knowledge about anything that might or might not happen in out years.
Okay, so hopefully with this restructuring, with the programming, that it will catch this so this doesn't happen in the out years, correct?
That's exactly right.
Absolutely.
Okay. Another thing, with the almost $3 million, $2.5 million here, do we have any, do we have any insurance for any of these kind of errors or anything? Is there any other ways that we budget for that we are covered for this?
We are looking into that.
Okay. Are you aware of any other colleges that's experienced this same type of error?
We do know that there are other colleges that have, but we don't know what the resolution was. We have heard that there have been other colleges, but, again, I don't think the Chancellor's office would share that information, with us about what they did.
Oh, well, I'm just kind of looking
But it does happen. I mean, it's
Okay.
not this, we're not the first ones that ever did it, and we certainly won't be the last.
Okay, because I was just wondering if you would get some idea then from how the Chancellor office dealt with them in that situation. Since it would be a public.
Right. One thing that is different about our situation from the others that I know of is that we found the error ourselves.
Okay.
And we reported it. Okay. And we're hoping that that accounts for something. In the other cases that we know of or have heard of, those over-reportings were found by someone else, by auditors, and so we feel that we're in a little bit better position.
Okay, because in January was when you found the error.
Yes.
I see. Okay, thank you.
Dana Baker, CSEA. I was told about maybe 10, 15 years ago that there was a similar mistake with the FTs in the Galt Post Academy that the district had.
And I don't really know the details about that. That had nothing to do with this error, and I don't really know the story on that. There probably are people around here who might remember what happened, but
I was just wondering how it was handled when that happened back then.
I don't really know. There may be people who do remember that, but I don't know. And also, Dana, I think that one was the opposite situation from what we're in. That, I believe, was found by auditors or reported by someone, And this one, we found ourselves and reported it. So we think that's quite different.
Is there anybody else? Well, as Kathy said, I just want to take a moment to thank our staff for uncovering this and doing the right thing as quickly as we can. You know, I think, you know, we've, as was mentioned, you know, we've stopped this from continuing on, so we know it's not going to get any bigger, and that's a credit to Matt and our office, his office, and the folks that he mentioned. The board is concerned about this, and speaking on behalf of the board, and so we'll be monitoring it closely. And I know that Kathy or Dr. Hart will continue to keep everyone as up to date as we are, so that again we all share the same information. And so, Kathy, do you have anything to close with?
Just once again, I want to thank everybody for your interest and for coming and for asking the questions that you've asked. I hope you'll use the information that we give you as you talk to your colleagues and your students. I think it'll help you reassure them that everything's going to be fine and that we'll get through this just like we've gotten through other unfortunate situations. So again, thank you for coming, and we'll keep you in the loop as much as we possibly can. We'll be sending out the PowerPoint through Campus Business and Campus Announcements tomorrow, and we'll also post it on the Board of Trustees webpage. So again, thanks for coming.
And Kathy, and Trustee Rivera's question.